Okay, welcome back to your tutorial for the pet portrait on your mini canvas. We are going to be doing the eyes. So after your background, we're going to start with the facial features, and the eyes are my favorite. So we're grabbing the smallest brush you have. I have a size 3 liner brush. Let's see if it'll focus on there. It is very teeny tiny pointy brush. It allows me to get the tiniest little lines, and it's super ideal for the mini canvas. There actually are smaller paintbrushes than this. If you have those, feel free to use them, but you definitely want to do your best to have this tiny brush. If all you have is something maybe like this, see, quite a bit bigger, then do your best. It'll still work out. You're going to want to be using the very tip of the brush with very light pressure, barely touching when you're painting. Okay? So, moving forward, I want to show you guys a technique called rolling the brush. And so no matter how big your brush is, this technique with a round brush is going to get you to have a very teeny tip on your brush, which is very helpful for this mini canvas. So I always kind of dip my brush in the water, wipe most of it off, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of our black paint off to the side so we get a smaller little puddle of paint here. And we're going to roll the brush in that little bit of paint on its side. So we're getting a nice fine tip of paint instead of dipping the brush into the paint and we've got a nice big glob on it. This way we've got paint on the brush, but a very fine tip. So for the eyes, take a look at your picture. On Andrew here, he's got very apparent eyeliner. You can see these very kind of large, very dark outlines around the eyes. They're thinner on the bottom, but nice and big on the top. So take a look at your animal. There's typically going to be eyeliner either on all around the eye or at least on one side, either the top or the bottom. So take a look. It's different for everyone, mostly because of the lighting and the fur and skin around the animal's eyes. So what we want to notice is there a dark outline all the way around the eye? Is it thicker on one side, thinner on the other? Typically the top will be thicker. And then normally there is a highlight, a lighter color, maybe a gray or a brown, or depending on the skin color of your animal, there's going to be a lighter area. So for Andrew, he's got little bits of lighter skin right on the inside here that I can see. And he's also got this nice, very light fur underneath the eyes. Now, that's not necessarily part of his eye, but it's definitely good to notice. With Andrew, it's more apparently his fur, but with a dog, it might be less apparent what is fur and what is skin. So just take notice of that and let's get started. So we're all going to probably be starting with black here, unless your pet has very light pinkish skin around the eyes, then you can use a pink and you can darken it with brown and or black. Tiny bit of black into pink turns into this kind of pinky gray color. But typically we'll start with black. So roll that little brush into your black paint, get a nice fine tip. So when we come into the canvas, some really important things when we're doing details is to anchor your hand. You don't really want your hand to just float around and be shaking, right? So if you can get your elbow on the table or on your knee with your foot flat on the ground, another option is to rest your pinky. The canvas is kind of small, so probably not on the canvas, but somewhere nearby. So steadying your hand when you come in, The only thing moving is what you choose to move with your fingers. All right, so we're coming in, I'm anchoring, and here we go. So just very lightly apply this paint. You can do a nice long stroke, or you can take your time with some smaller ones. And filling in the drawing. Your drawing should probably have some kind of eyeliner outline, but because it's such a small canvas, I can't get every little bit. So potentially part of your eyeliner is just simply outlining the eyeball. So you can see the line down here. It's not a shape to fill in, but it is a line, and I'm going to fill it. There we go. So you can see on Andrew, he also has kind of like a tear duct that's darker here. So I'm going to go ahead and put some black on that. Now I might lighten that up later with some brown, but for now, I'm going to go dark. So every couple of strokes on the canvas, I'm re-rolling the brush into the paint. Now because these are so small, teeny little canvases, details are less important here, and taking on more of an impression of what is really there is going to be a lot easier, make it a lot more fun for you. Okay. So cute. Okay, so I'm going to rinse my brush off, and we're going to next move into the iris, the colored part of the eye. We'll briefly talk about this. So with Andrew, he's got green, kind of yellow eyes with a darker shadow around the edges. So typically, no matter what color your animal's eyes are, there's going to be a bit of shadow near the top somewhere and or on the sides around the edges of the irises. So take a look at your photo. What color are the eyes? What colors do you need? Is there a darker shadow, a darker rim somewhere? And mix those colors if you don't have them ready to go. So light blue, a little white. You could mix a little bit of black into some blue if you needed a rim. For brown eyes, or eyes that appear to be all black, I always lighten them just a little bit, sometimes exaggerating them as if the light was shining in them, even though in your photo it might be a little dark and the light isn't really shining in them. You know your pet best. You know when the light is hitting their eyes what the true color is. So I always recommend lighten it up a little bit if you need to. Have fun with it. For Andrew, I'm not going to try and get this exact shade, but I am going to get something pretty close. All right, so begin mixing your color. And I'm mixing with my little brush here just because I'm only going to need this color once. So I'm not worried about needing it later on. I'm going for a little green, a little yellow, a little white. And then you're going to want to make your darker color as well. So I added a little bit of brown. Another thing you can do is to see if the color is somewhere where you like it is bring the paintbrush with the paint up close to the eye. Now this color that I have is much, much brighter. So I'm thinking a little more white here, soften it. and a little bit of this brown to bring it into a little more earthy of a tone. Now that's a lot more like it. Getting close, keep playing with it. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that color. It's going to be at least a good base, and we can add a little bit of brown to darken it. So once you've got your colors, again, we're just very carefully filling in the space. So I'm going super slow. I want to keep the shape of the eyes as best as I can. So taking my time. If you need to cover up the pupil at all, that's okay. We can come back to it later on. All right, so if you went over some of your eyeliner like I did a little bit right here, no worries. I'm just going to rinse off my brush, roll a little bit of black back onto the brush, and just very carefully come back over and cover it up. So I'm noticing that the eye shape is a little different. So I'm editing where I see fit. I'm thinking just making the eyes seem a little bit more round on the canvas. There we go. And give your brush a rinse. So once we've got the first color of the eye down, now you're going to want to move on to that second color, slightly darker version, maybe even a different color. Eyes are pretty amazing. So I've just added a little bit of brown, and I'm going to take a look. It seems to be around most of the edges. I'm going to start on the sides. There isn't a whole lot of contrast going on, but it's just dark enough and different enough to create some shape and shadow on the color of the eyes here. I might go just a tiny bit darker and see how it looks. And if you didn't like your color, a couple options is one, wait for it to dry, paint over it. And two is bring that other color back over top of it and cover it up. Okay, and if you wanted to do a bit of blending between the two colors, I'm going to rinse the brush just a bit, grabbing some of that original color and just kind of go over the edge where the two colors meet. Okay. So you can fuss with that until you're happy with it, and or stop when you start fussing. And I'm tempted to darken mine just a little more. There's a really nice dark shadow on these sides, and I'm going to attempt to capture it. So I'm actually going to go with some brown right along the edge here. That may have been a little much. I'll try and soften it a little. Cool. So it's definitely darker. It's more of what I was looking for. And moving on, we are going to do the pupils next. Typically they are black, so roll that little teeny brush back into your black. Now for Cat's eyes, of course, he has slits. In a darker photo, they might be more oval shaped. For your dog, they're going to be round. So just notice what's there on your picture. If you didn't cover up the pupils with the paint, then you should be able to fill it right in. If you did cover it up, you can probably see some of the outline and or let your photo guide you. Sometimes it's more important to get it even on the canvas. So if one of them gets a little bit too big, if you can adjust the other one to match, that will be the easiest way to get them together. Now these are so tiny on him, and I'm being very, very slowly careful here. Whew! I was holding my breath here. Okay. That's almost creepy. So it looks a little intense. I'm gonna let it dry, and I might soften it with just a little bit of that green over top. In my photo, the slits are so teeny that he almost looks kind of snake-like in this one. But no worries, we can come back and play with that later. One thing we can do in the meantime is on the eyeliner, if you haven't already added your highlight, we're going to add that in. So I'm making a little gray, a little bit of black, a little bit of white. Not too light, not too dark. Want it to be contrasting with the black and show up against it. Rolling the brush. So for Andrew, he just has a little bit in the corner of his eyes. And almost looks like there's a little across the top. So we'll add just a little bit. Yeah, that looks nice. There we go. Okay, and the final step for the eyes is to add a highlight. So take a look at your photo. There's always going to be a shiny bit of reflective light somewhere in the eyes. On Andrew, he's got quite a bit. He's outside, there's a lot of light. So I can almost see my backyard reflected in his eyes. But it looks like a little square here, triangle, little shapes of light. I typically will want to simplify it. I always suggest simplifying the highlight. We don't need to get all the little shapes onto this tiny canvas. So I've rolled my brush into my white, little spot of white here, and I'm going to pick a side and just put a little white dot somewhere near the pupil on the same side of both sides. So if you went on the left side of the left eye, go on the left side of the right eye. And you can make them stand out as much as you want or dull them a little. It's up to you. If you want them to stand out, you can just add maybe a second little coat. Sometimes you can do two little dots, one big one slightly smaller, and that creates a pretty cool look. And I might even go crazy and add extra shinies, I don't know. So that is it for the eyes, and we are ready to move on to the next step, which is the nose.